Hey, everybody, welcome back to Build It with Tim. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about filtering and how filtering is one of the most important parts of Tadabase. Now, for this episode, I wanted to try to come back to foundational stuff, back to basics, as they say, right? We're talking about filtering inside of Tadabase. And to do that, we're going to talk about a lot of different features and areas within Tadabase where filtering is available to you. And so, we're going to be talking about 8 different ways that you can apply filtering to different areas and parts of your application today. And we're going to start with data source filtering. So in this case, I've added a page that displays records from my rental unit data table. Now, if I look at this component by clicking on it and I open up this component configuration window, I can navigate to the data source tab. Now, inside this tab, you can see that the source of the actual data here is coming from the rental units data table. Now, what if I wanted to filter what records actually show? And I want to filter this before the page even loads. Then I can add a new filter inside the data source filters menu. And let's say we wanted to only show rental units where the status of the unit is vacant. Okay, so by adding that data source filter, when I preview this page, it's only going to show me the vacant units. Now, for the next method of filtering, this is not actually filtering that takes place in the published application, but rather behind the scenes in the builder. So as an administrator of a particular application, if you're the one building the application, there may be instances where you actually want to go into your app and you want to filter the data as it sits. So if we wanted to do the same thing kind of behind the scenes in order to get an idea of the data that we have stored in our application, we can add filters right here in the data builder in order to get a better image about any specific data set. So if I wanted to do the same filter here, I can see that these are the 3 records that I have. All right, for the next one, we're going to stay inside the data builder itself because this next method of filtering has to do with actual filtering how fields will calculate different pieces of information. So in this example here, we're looking at kind of 2 tables side by side, if you will, where we have rental properties and we have rental units, where each rental unit actually connects to a particular rental property. Okay, so each rental unit has a monthly rent and they have a status field, whether it's leased, vacant, or pending. Now, inside of the rental properties data table here, I have a field called average monthly rent, which is looking at the connected rental units and telling me how much average monthly rent I'm getting for each unit for the property. Now, this particular field is what's known as a complex formula, which means we're doing a calculation on a connected value. You can find that here listed as average. However, this method also works for a rollup field. Now, right now, when we edit this field, you're going to see that we are performing an average value function on the monthly rent of the rental unit. However, if I wanted to add a filter, or in this case, a condition, to only average the rental units where the status is vacant, this is a way to filter the actual data that we're going to perform our calculation on. So you can see that this particular property has no average monthly income or rent because none of their actual units are currently leased. In the same way that we just placed a condition in order to filter what data gets calculated through a complex formula or a rollup field, the next example of filtering using conditions is through the use of rules and automations. In this page, I have a table that's showing me all of my property listings. And in this table, I am displaying 2 different status fields. I have the actual property status and the offer status. Now, what I want to do is when I change the offer status to accepted, I want to update the status field to pending. We can do that by first creating an edit form and then creating a rule inside of the edit form that will update that record value to what I want, which is set the status to a custom value of pending. However, in order to apply the correct filtering, we're going to add a condition to say we're only going to do this when the offer status is accepted and the status is for sale. If I go back to this page and edit this, you can see we'll try this one first where the offer status has already been accepted and it's been sold. So if I go back and I edit this record in any other way in any other area, at the moment, if I save this, nothing's going to change. But if I edit a record that matches that condition or passes through that filter, then our values are going to change like we want them to. All right, for this next example of how you can filter data, we're talking about how to filter data through the actual data intake process. Now, on this page, I have a form component that is built to accept rental applications. Now, when the user is filling out this form, we have two connection fields on here. The user first has to select a property, and then they have to select a unit. Now, by default, when I first add these fields to the form, we have a little bit of a problem. Number one, we don't have a way to link the unit to the selected property. So you can see that I can select a particular property, but then as I show the units, I can see the units from other properties other than the one I've currently selected. The next problem that we have is I only want to show units that are currently vacant. To make sure that we're filtering the correct data, we're going to go back to our page builder and we are going to edit our form component. And the first problem that we're going to address is actually setting a dependency on the unit to the property. So we are going to click to edit the unit connection field, and then we can change this from show all records to show rental units that are connected to this form's property. And the next thing we are going to change is through the filter records tab, where we are then filtering the record or the actual rental units themselves. And we are only going to show units where the status is vacant. Okay, so back to this particular form. You can see that if I select a property, we are now limiting or filtering the results that are shown to the user. All right, for the last three things that we're talking about here when it comes to filtering, we're going to be doing it all on this one page. And those three things are going to be filter tabs, a user configured filter menu, and a search component. All right, so here is a table of rental applications, and I'm going to be focused on this status field. I have unread, closed, and open. So these are applications that came in, and our admin staff for this particular app needs to then process these applications. The first thing that I might want to do is give the end user the ability to filter this however they want. To do that, we are going to go into our page builder and we're going to click on our table component. Now, the table component has the option to enable filters. Now, what this means is that it gives the end user the ability to add their own filters and filter this on the fly. So if we wanted to do where the status is unread, we can add that filter to limit the records that we're currently viewing. Now, if there's a set of filters that you commonly come back to, we can simply create filter tabs as pre-configured filters that the user can just click on in order to filter that as quickly as possible. Again, we're going to go into our page builder and we are going to choose filters and then enable filter tabs. And to create a filter tab, we just have to give it a name and then set the actual condition or the filter that we want to have placed on the data. And you can add a whole bunch of filter tabs to cover all of the possible filter combinations that you might want. And then we can save the page. And when we go back to our page, you can see we now have these three tabs. So if I wanted to just view unread, open, or closed, we can do that simply by clicking on the filter tab itself. So last but not least is the search component. Now, this might be a component that you wouldn't typically think of as something that applies filtering because the name implies that we're searching. But if you think about how that actually works and the criteria that you can place within the search, that's almost exactly what it's doing. Now, in this page, again, where we're showing rental applications, I want to add a search component here in order to apply these filters to, or the search criteria to the rental applications table. So I'm going to make sure that I choose rental applications, and then I can customize the search component. Now, this looks very much like a form component. We can add different fields from the data table that we want to search on, or rather filter by. And after we add our fields, we're going to connect it to the other data components on the page. So here we have the rental application data table. We can go ahead and connect that. And we can also choose the option to load upon search, which I'll turn that on so that I can show you what that looks like. Now, similarly to how other filtering works inside of Tadabase, we also have the option to do match all or match any, as well as the ability to have predefined operators. So if I wanted to only give the user the ability to select is or is blank, we could do that here inside of the field configuration window. All right, but I'm going to update and save this, and we'll head to this page so that you can see what this looks like. Now, because I chose the option to only load the data upon submission, right now we have no data to display. First, we have to actually apply the filters or the search criteria and then click the search button. So status is unread. We are now showing a filtered list of records through this table component. Additionally, I can modify this at any time to update the records that are going to show for me based on the specific criteria that I chose. So as you can see, as we're talking about filtering inside of Tadabase, that rabbit hole can go quite deep, where we can create layer upon layer of filters in order to get the data and manipulate the data, view the data as we wish. For example, you could have a complex formula field that is filtering what records it's currently counting. Then you can display that field inside of a table component on a page that has a data source filter applied to it, where that data source filter is actually looking at the complex formula to only show records where that particular value is higher or lower than some pre-configured amount, right? Then once that page actually loads, you could have a search component on the page, which is then used to apply more filters to the data, okay? It can go on and on and on. The point is that there are so many different ways of filtering inside of Tadabase. It's important to learn how to use each one, the features and functions and reasons behind using each one, and then how to use them all together. All right, so that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.